before I could turn or get my eye on the flash, it was gone. Now, the first impression was, well, something just penetrated the inside of the spacecraft. And so I asked Neil and Mike, and Neil said, yeah, I saw about 100 of them.
For the crew, the flashes were far more worrying than the mystery UFO. In the vacuum of space, anything penetrating the spacecraft could spell disaster. On his return, Aldrin reported them to NASA.
The conclusion was that they're high Z particles, Z meaning a heavy particle at high velocity, that penetrate the spacecraft, penetrate the individual, and cause some potential damage to nerve cells and brain cells, but only over a long period of time, evidently.
Even today, scientists don't truly understand the long-term effects of Z particles on a human body. Apollo 11 flew on, constantly bombarded by particles. But worse was to come. Now, as the craft reached lunar orbit 260,000 miles from home, the astronauts prepared for what would be the most dangerous and unpredictable part of the mission, the descent to the moon itself.
The controllers are normally a very chatty group. They always got some kind of a wisecrack, some kind of a joke. On this day, there was a degree of seriousness that I hadn't seen before or hadn't seen in training. You finally realize this is real. This is the whole enchilada. We're going for broke. Today, we land in the moon.
As Apollo 11 orbited 80 miles above the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module before undocking, leaving Collins behind in the command ship. The strangest spaceship ever to fly, the lunar module, codenamed Eagle, was known around the globe as a miracle of engineering. Mission Control knew, however, that behind the space-age design lay some drastic weaknesses.
The lunar module, I think, totally loaded, weighed a little over 33,000 pounds. The skin on the crew cabin was very thin, and that was all done because of weight savings. Weight was a very critical item that always had to be considered in anything that you did.
If you really took your finger and poked hard at it, you could poke right through the outer skin of the spacecraft. It was about the thickness of 2 layers of aluminum foil. But it's the kind of thing that you were reasonably cautious that you didn't jab any pointed objects through.
But the fragile skin of the craft was not the only danger. Behind the scenes, the development of the module had been fraught with serious accidents and breakdowns. One such failure had almost cost Neil Armstrong his life. In training for the flight, Armstrong had practiced on 2 bizarre prototypes that mimicked the gravity conditions of the moon.
In order to train the crews, we used 2 vehicles, the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle and the Lunar Research Vehicle. And one was suspended on wires and was very safe and didn't have actual engines. And then there was the hairy, scary Lunar Landing Training Vehicle.
Buzz Aldrin already had his doubts about the lunar trainer.
I could see that this was a vehicle that you had to really pay very close attention to. If you had not completely shut off the descent thrust, you could run out of attitude fuel much sooner than you might expect.
The motor that was simulating the lunar module engine was the one that Neil Armstrong would throttle in order to rehearse going down to the surface of the moon. And, as all human machines tend to, they fail occasionally.
Despite the disaster, NASA chiefs were impressed with Armstrong's quick reactions.
Neil Armstrong really got an assured ticket to a flight on Apollo 11. because of his success in saving his own life and ejecting when he came within a fraction of a second of death.
With no second chances in space, Armstrong and Aldrin would now have to pilot the real lunar module faultlessly on its designated flight path around the dark side of the moon before the final landing attempt. Immediately, things started to go wrong.
As soon as the spacecraft came around from behind the moon, we got tracking data that indicated it was not on the proper trajectory. My guidance officer, Steve Bales, calls out flight. I'm about halfway to my abort limit here. We seem to be out in our radial velocity. As soon as he said the words halfway to our abort limit, our communications were all broken. We couldn't communicate with the lunar module.
The breakdown had come at the worst moment for Mission Control. They needed information for a crucial decision.
It was up to me to decide if we had enough information to make them go, no go, and continue the descent to the moon. 5 minutes prior to powered descent, I had my controllers go through a go, no go, and immediately we lost data again. So I added the words, "Give me your go, no go based on the last valid frame of data that you saw."
Okay, all flight controllers, go, no go for landing. Retro, go. Fido, go. Guidance, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. GNC, go. Econ, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for landing.
As communications cut in and out, the lunar module began to power its way down to the surface.
Get that Telcom, you're a go. You go to continue power descent. You're a go to continue power descent.
It was sort of like a controlled fall out of orbit. It's almost like a car on a very long mountain road, the driver riding the brake to adjust the speed and keep from going too fast.
To avoid colliding with the moon, the lunar module now switched on its landing radar to determine its precise altitude.
Okay, we got data back. Radar flight looks good. Rod.
The landing radar could begin to feed in the difference between its position and velocity and what the computer thought the position and velocity was, and that number, as it began to correct, would go smaller and smaller.
Rod. 2,000 feet. Rod.
But switching on the landing radar started a catastrophic chain of events that would turn the landing from a drama into a full-blown crisis.